Welcome to the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. This is your host, Sheng Peng, and your special summertime guest host of not the, but a premier San Jose Sharks podcast, a good friend who's grown said podcast to arguably the biggest San Jose Sharks podcast around, the Al Simmons to my Daryl Sutter, and now the busiest man in San Jose, this side of Brent Burns, JD Young of Locked On Sharks.
I take exception to everything that was said there.
Originally, I said that you're my RC Cola to my Coca-Cola, which I think is
that's brutal.
I hope I did Kyle proud there. So shout out to Kyle there.
Yes. Well, at least I'm not even the main. I'm not even the main character on my own podcast. So yeah, we'll see. But yes, I'm here. If you guys don't know me, I am JD Young, one half of the content boys on the Locked On Sharks podcast. I will still be doing the Locked On Sharks podcast. Now I'm double dipping, as they say, playing both sides of the podcast fence. So
learning everything about the San Jose Sharks, San Jose Hockey Now podcast empire. So
yes, building my own Teal empire here. Watch out, Teal Town, you are next. So yeah, I'm going to be hosting duties with Sheng. If you don't know, I've been Locked On Sharks. Before that, I was a contributor for Fear the Fin for a while. That's where Sheng and I actually met, and for some reason he put up with my shenanigans, and here we are now, Sheng. Here we are. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? So today's I was the bottom of the barrel here. But on today's episode, so we're going to kind of cover some of the news, of course, as always is done on the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. Dakota is making her grand appearance on the San Jose Hockey Now podcast, drinking water. If you're a longtime listener of Locked On Sharks, you know we'll at some point have to get Dakota and Mushu together. That would be fun. But so we're going to cover some of the news today. Sharks did some contracts. We got some spicy rumors season because that's this time of year. And then we're going to get into the draft with a friend of the show, Chris Peters, comes on, talks about the 2022 draft, along with some of the Sharks prospects and how they've kind of fared after their seasons have wrapped up. So Sheng, let's start with the tidy bit of business with Barabanov getting a surprising, I thought, $2 by $2.5 million contract, especially when during the season you reported that his team, his people wanted to get that Robbie Fabry, 3 or 4 years, $3 or $4 million type of deal. And the Sharks, I think, kind of cleaned up here, right?
Well, if I may add, though, if you were a recent reader of San Jose Hockey Now, you can see that I revised those numbers because the more I dug into it, the more I learned. If you look at the last thing I wrote about Barabanov and his contract, that the numbers that I started to be given were, if it was 2 years, it would be roughly $2 to $3 million. If it was 3 years, then we're talking maybe, 3.5, and then 4 years are a little bit more. Basically, the more years you get, the more of his free agency years you tie up, then of course you pay more. That's natural for any contract. And so I actually wasn't surprised at this kind of a lowish figure, or what I guess is seen as a lowish figure, because that's what it was kind of coming to. And I think the main reason for that was just Barabanov just doesn't have the games under 100 NHL games. Even the Fabry example that I kind of that I was kind of hearing early on, but Fabry had a lot of. Granted, Fabry had a knee injury. People didn't know what he was, kind of. And it wasn't until he got to Detroit where he kind of rebuilt his value. But he was also a former first-round pick that played a lot of games in NHL before his injury. And so he was, to some degree, a known quantity. Barabanov, KHL veteran, didn't even have that, in his early 20s, that kind of proof that he could play in the league. And so I think that's why his contract ended up so relatively low.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the Sharks, this is a really good business for a guy who's proven to be your top line guy. I mean, I don't think on a contending team he's probably a top line guy, but he can figure into your top six at least, especially as more talent starts to seep into the Sharks system here. And then in 2 years, you can either re-sign him if he's continuing to do well, or you can trade him. I know he's got like a 10-team no trade clause, but it kind of gives you options of what to do with him, and you're not stuck into like a poor Kevin LeBanc, but a Kevin LeBanc type deal where it's like, oh God, we've give him all this money and all this time, and then he is not producing at what we expected him to do.
Yeah, no, it's a good sort of a dip in the water, just like his 1-year contract was. Of course, though, if he does outperform this contract, like he performed his last one, outperformed his last one, then he's going to get expensive, and then you're going to be hoping that or wishing that you had given him Kevin LeBanc money.
But at that point, too, then he's going to be crossing the 30-year-old line, and you're hoping that by then your Robbins, your Coes, your Wiesblatts are able to start to take a bigger step, or your Eklunds and Bordelots, that these guys have established themselves and that you can kind of move on with your homegrown talent. So
yeah, no, that's a fair point. He's probably a bridge guy, right? He's not a guy that is sort of the destination for the Sharks.
Nope. Yeah, he can hold down the fort right now while your younger guys are developing. So another one, Jacob Megna, a little bit older defenseman. He got a 2-year, basically a vet min contract here to play.
Actually, it's exactly a vet min contract because I looked it up to make sure. Because his contract is $750 and then $775 2 years from now, and that's because the vet min is going to be $750 this coming year, but it's going to rise to $775. So they can't pay him any less.
Yes, we tried to pay you less, but we couldn't. So yeah, he's there's people who I'm kind of meh on Jacob Megna. He's fine. He's a perfectly
you're Magna. Wait,
no, he's a perfectly serviceable defenseman who can eat up some minutes here and there, but it's I think also rewarding your guys who've gone through your system and you developed him and stuff. So, but he's not, if one of your other younger guys starts to pop, he's not going to be keep beating them from playing. And if you need to bury him in the AHL, I don't think you're going to have to worry about somebody picking him off.
No, you don't. Yeah. And also too, you can bury the complete cap hit too. It's so low, right? So
yeah.
I like the signing. I mean, there's really nothing to complain about. I mean, he's a guy that ideally, I think on a good team, I think he has actually established himself in my eyes as a guy that I would expect to be a full-time NHLer, but on a good team, he would be on your bottom pairing. He shouldn't be on your top pairing, which obviously where he ended up at some points last year, but that wasn't his fault. That wasn't his fault though. He did okay with it. And so he's a guy that I think can be good on your bottom pairing, can move up every once in a while and, not hurt you too much. You can win some games with him, which the Sharks did. And great in the locker room and all that stuff, and a better player than I think people give him credit for, just in terms of just his defending and whatnot. And I think the big thing for him too is just that this contract it's a one-way contract. And so if they send him down, they had to pay him the full amount. That's the big deal there. And that's the big reward for a guy that has taken a long time to kind of get to this point. He's not even at 100 NHL games yet, and he's 29 years old.
Yeah, and again, he's perfectly serviceable. Good for him. Get your money. Get rewarded for your development. And if you got to bury him, or if he's your 7th D or something like that, that's fine. He seems like a good enough guy who can, he's going to do whatever the coaches ask, et cetera, type of thing. So some very spicy news though is it seems that there's whispers that the Sharks are open to trading Burns and or Erik Karlsson. They've had conversations apparently about it. I would assume Brent Burns would probably be the one that actually would be more likely to go between the two, because his contract is just easier to move. He actually, I think, has more perceived value in the NHL than Erik Karlsson.
He can stay healthier too.
He can also actually stay healthy and play all his games. I mean, Brent Burns is coming off literally the season where he played the most amount of minutes in his entire career. He produced pretty well, this season as well. I think he was 4th on the team in points. But I mean, you would think that if the Sharks wanted to really open up some cap space, moving $8 million out would be a nice way to do it. And Brent Burns does have perceived value. So if the Sharks wanted to do it, I know he has a 3-team trade list and stuff, but it seems like that door that's been shut for a long time has started to crack open with Burns, and he might be open to playing somewhere else in San Jose. Is it possible, and what are the Sharks looking at getting in return?
I think it's very possible. And actually, there were already whispers last summer, according to The Athletic, that Burns could be open to it. And, what the story to me is not surprising at all. To me, it's like, well, what took so long insofar as, and I actually think that in a lot of ways, these guys have both been kind of available just if a team wanted to take a crack at them. Because look, Karlsson's contract has been a millstone an anchor on the Sharks for years already, right? And look, he was great to start the season, but he has not lived up to it. No one, even his most ardent of fans, couldn't argue that he's lived up to his contract. And so
pay him more.
If it helps him grow more hair, because that hair is still
that hair is so beautiful.
Well,
he has to pay. How do you think it gets? He has to pay for
that product, right? That product.
The product, yeah. It is shipped from Sweden every day. It's expensive. That's what it's all going towards.
But so I think it's always been like, with Karlsson, wouldn't surprise me. I don't know this for a fact, but look, if a team was interested in him last year, the Sharks would have traded him in a second if a team will take that contract, And, this year, some talks, probably the talks came about because people started seeing once again, hey, Erik Karlsson, when he's engaged, when he's healthy-ish, he can still be a great player, right? And we did see that at the beginning of the season. But of course, just that contract, and so, moving him will just be less likely, just because for that reason. Burns will be more likely, even though Burns is older, because, like you mentioned, Burns is durable and Burns is cheaper, and his contract doesn't last as long. And so those are all big points on a Burns kind of factor or scale there. And just in terms of the likelihood, well, like I said, if Burns was interested last year, well, another year out of the playoffs, he's getting older. Well, why would he not, in theory, be interested this time around? Depending on where he goes, of course, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, I think if he wants to go, if he wants to win, and it's probably not, I mean, at least win a Stanley Cup, it's probably not going to be in San Jose. So why wouldn't he consider, leaving, right? And in terms of what they can get, this is going to be a tricky part for him. San Jose wants, according to Elliot Friedman, they want a good return for Brent Burns, but what is that good return? The Sharks supposedly want to win now, right? And so does it have to be something that can help them win now? Well, who's giving you that for a 37-year-old defenseman who is, has 3 years left on his contract, $8 million, right? And so then, then you think, okay, well, maybe San Jose's got to retain then. So turning Brent Burns from a 3-year, $24 million defenseman to a 3-year, $18 million defenseman, right? You retain $2 million. That starts to sound more reasonable. And maybe you might get something that you like back. But I think if the Sharks are I'm just guessing, if the Sharks are looking for a win now kind of piece, like let's say, I'm just throwing this out there, right? Like let's say when the Islanders are trading Devin Taves, right? And would the Islanders have traded Devin Taves for a Brent Burns? No, why? They're trying to dump salary, I believe, that sort of thing, right? You got to look at both sides and what both sides need. And also too, if a side is trying to win now, are they going to trade a good player? Well, they're not going to trade, in that case, that's a different case because they traded Taves for draft picks. But, is a good team going to hurt themselves by trading one of the good current players for another good, they're not going to make a lateral move like that, good player for Brent Burns. So what might make more sense in the end, if a trade comes about, if Brent Burns really wants to leave, is you trade Brent Burns for draft picks. Maybe you retain to get better draft picks. I'm not really sure how you go about that, right? Yeah. But then what you do, though, so it's not so you can still fulfill the goal of trying to win next year, is trade Brent Burns for draft picks, and then you redistribute that cap space toward free agency.
Yeah.
Right?
Makes sense.
Right, yeah. So then it becomes like, you traded Brent Burns for a third-round pick. That's the direct trade, right? But then you use that money to sign Burakovsky.
Yeah.
Right. And then becomes Burns for Burakovsky in the third, kind of. So it makes a little more sense that way.
Or if you flip the pick to somebody else who's maybe trying to dump a salary or something like that type of thing. Another, I think with Burns too, is maybe one of those younger teams who are trying to kind of take that next step, where it's like maybe I'm trying to like off the top of my head, like a team who's kind of like happy to be there in the playoffs and they want to kind of make that next step, and they maybe their pipeline's kind of full.
How about LA,
LA.
where Drew Doughty famously said that, hey, Brent Burns, he gets beat 20 times a game.
Yeah. Or a team like the Rangers who has an overflowing prospect pool,
Sure.
but like, they get to the playoffs, and I mean, as of right now, I think they still have a game 7 against Pittsburgh, but like they're not expected to do too much, but they have a young core, and maybe helps that.
I think they're down 3-2. No.
Yeah, 3-2. I think I don't know, but yeah. Anyway, as we're recording this, it's who knows? But time is a flat circle. But a team like that where they're trying to add that next piece to be able to
sure. I mean, both those teams mentioned,
and especially a team like the Rangers, where they have Fox, who can be your 1D, and then Brent Burns can slide into your second pair, and he's not having to play 1,000 minutes a night, and he can contribute that way, type of thing. So I already made the deal. Let's go.
No, I mean those teams would be teams like, of course, the other part of the equation, of course, is where does Brent want to go, right? Because he has that 3-team trade clause.
That's the thing. He controls wherever he wants to go.
Right.
If he's like, I don't want to go to the Rangers, or I don't want to go to wherever, not much you can do about it. So
I mean, I think it's really important too that at least the Sharks under Doug Wilson, they were the type of team generally that were going to respect a player like a Brent Burns, a long-term guy like that too. Or even if they had the power to, they weren't going to send Brent Burns to somewhere that he wouldn't want to go. LA and New York are the type of places that I think would still be appealing because those teams are up and coming. So that's got to be the right team, right? Because if you say, oh well, New Jersey is an up and coming team, well,
no goalies.
Right. Well, why? Why they may well be an up and coming team, but what would the appeal, be there if you're Brent Burns and you've got 3 years left in your contract, you're going to be 40 at the end of your contract. So, so that's another big factor too. That's going to obviously shape things. But yeah, I do think one of the thing too that you think about when you hear this is that the fact that it's leaked out. Like I said, I think that basically every Shark has been available over the last couple of years. I mean, if you look at it honestly, right? Like, cap strapped, bad results, right? Who really isn't available? Who is untouchable on this team, right? Maybe some of your prospects. Well, Eklund, right? Your first round pick is untouchable. Maybe like some of the youngish guys, like a Hurdle is maybe not untouchable, but tough to get, right? Because
like Hurdle, you would if they had not re-signed him, you could have literally asked for the world and gotten it back at the trade deadline last season. But
or Meyer, right?
But like, even Meyer was rumored last season.
Well, because Meyer was bad.
Yeah,
just like LeBanc, right? Like if someone had given the Sharks a reasonable offer for Meyer that wasn't a buy low, $0.75 on a dollar offer, like buying not just buying like Timo's potential, right? In a trade, the Sharks probably would have really considered that too. And same goes with Burns and Karlsson. And so I think the fact that it is slipped, I put this now we're doing video, slipped out, is intentional too. That's my guess. I don't know that for a fact, but it is interesting too when and not to say that Doug Wilson wouldn't have said anything different, but Curtis Pashelka spoke with Joe Will a couple of days ago, and Joe said that there are kind of no limit, like nothing is really off limits to improve the team, right? And you can construe that to William Eklund, everything on the Sharks, right? But he was asked about Burns and Karlsson, right? And not to say that Doug Wilson wouldn't give that sort of very general answer. Anything to do to improve the team, I had to consider, right? But it definitely wasn't a shutdown either of the idea, and so. So anyway, I think that the fact that it even is out there is very, very telling. And so I think that, again, a lot of it depends on what Brent Burns wants to do. So
that's fair. I mean, it's going to be interesting, especially with these players who have been stalwarts of your franchise. And, at some point, you got to look at if you're trying to win a cup. Is Brent Burns winning you a cup in the next 3 years? Are you winning a cup with Brent Burns in the next 3 years? And
Well, I don't know if that's the way to look at it, right? Because I think the Sharks want to win, right? So I think the question more is like whatever you're getting back, it may not be directly for Burns, like we said, right? It's
yeah,
what you get, and then
it
you
gives you
use that money,
assets to do something
right?
else with it. Yeah,
But
and redistribute that. Yeah.
whatever you acquire does that, or what do you acquire in the aggregate, does that make you a better team over the
Yeah.
next 3 years? Because that's what complicates things. If the Sharks were rebuilding, it would be pretty simple. Then you just trade Burns for anything, retain money, get a better pick, it's easy,
et cetera.
right? Yeah.
Yep. Other spicy defensive news. Radim Šimić doesn't seem like he's going to be a San Jose Shark for much longer. Or at least it doesn't seem like he wants to come back and be a San Jose Shark for much longer.
Yeah.
You had an article where it seemed like he felt like he was lied to by the Sharks. They were, he was told that he's going to play, but then of course they played all the children. And when he does play, he's got to be a forward. So it seems like Radim Šimić probably not back in teal at this point.
It doesn't sound like a guy, definitely not a guy that wants to come back. And of course, he's not a guy that's easy to get rid of because he is making $2.25 million a year, but he's not playing at all. And he's basically a bottom pairing or a scratch guy that's making that money. On the other hand, though, he is a guy though that if you really wanted to get rid of the money, it's only 2 years. Maybe you attach a pick. I think a team would take it on, like a third roundish. Not a higher pick than you want to give up, but if you really want to clear that space, that's possible. You can also bury his contract, and that half of his contract would be buried in the minors. So then only $1 million cap hit left. I know people have mentioned you can buy it out too, but I don't think that, I gotta look at the numbers again, but I don't think the buyout's worth it for him.
No, because usually here I'm pulling up the buyout right now. Like
it's less than or it's more than the Barry amount, right?
Yeah. So if they were to buy him out this summer, they would save 1.2 million this year. The next year they would save 900,000, and then they would cost scratch that. The cap hit next year would be 1.2 million. The cap hit a year after that would be 900,000, and then you'd have 2 years of a cap hit of 600,000. So it's like for Šimić, he's got 2 years left. I'd rather just bury him in the AHL or
yeah, because you bury him at 1.1, right? So
it's not worth it, especially to stretch that out, especially if there might be other buyouts on the table for the Sharks potentially coming up. But that's for another day. So RIP Wiki Whisperer number 7 as the Sharks continue to look for another one.
I say though, I want to interject though. One of my readers, Dick Whitman, had a pretty great comment though. 'Tis the season for European players to spill tea and be honest to local press. I love that.
Love it. Yeah, we had Hurdle last year.
Hurdle, Vlasic.
Yes. Oh, it's gonna be great. Oh man. Oh. God, off season is the best season.
For this team.
Yes. Thank God. Let's keep with defensemen really quick. Kind of tie it up so that way we've hit literally every defenseman. Mario Ferraro. So, the Barabanov and Magna got their contracts, and Ferraro is the next guy on the table. But I mean, that contract's gonna be interesting because how much cap space might they have? Is it something they're going to have to wait for the Kane grievance to figure out? Or are they trying to, figure out a fair contract for a guy who had a down season, but has been playing out of position? I think he's logging too many minutes and kind of playing too high up in the lineup. But me personally, that's what I think. But what's the latest on Ferraro's contract? I assume he's going to get a contract, or is they going to try to play the RFA game with him, you think?
Well, actually, I would ask you, I was curious because what do you think has dropped off in his game? Because I actually don't think I've seen that much of a drop off. It's just that I do agree with you that he's put in a position, again, not his fault, where he shouldn't be on a team's top pairing necessarily, but I think he's still a good player. I see still a lot of good things that he did last year. It's just that, maybe ideally he's a middle pairing. But what has dropped off that you've seen?
For me, I think he hasn't taken that offensive step that I think we would have hoped, so his 1920 season and 61 games where he kind of, broke out, came out of nowhere. He had 11 points, and okay, that's great for a rookie, and then the 2021 season where 56 games, he had 1 goal, 16 assists, and 17 points. But then last year, in 63 games, he's got 14 points, and he's playing a lot more ice time. And I don't think he drives offense. And as we're going to talk with Chris Peters here soon, where he's going to talk about where the NHL, you need these guys who are going to, like, there's not going to be just shut down defensemen, one day, but like you need these guys who drive offense. And like you look at your Colorado's and your Tampa's and et cetera, like these high-end, high-caliber teams, and their defensemen are, the best way to play defense is when you don't have to play defense. If you're playing offense, the whole time. And I worry that he's going to get too big of a contract that he's not going to be able to fulfill that contract type of thing. So that's he just hasn't taken the offensive jumps so.
I think for me, I mean, I see a guy that can skate and make a good first pass, and like he doesn't drive offense for sure.
Yeah,
but I don't know if he ever really will, and I think that's fine. I do agree that we maybe haven't seen enough progression in his offensive game, but to me, that's not the same as necessarily, I would say, a step back, because I guess what I see that he's been good at over the years, I think he's still good at. Mm-hmm. And I think he is a good compliment to Brent Burns. Just ideally that you would want, what were the Sharks supposed to be when Doug Wilson, gave Vlasic an extension, when he gave Karlsson an extension, right? I think the idea was that, Vlasic and Karlsson are younger than Burns. That Vlasic and Karlsson could be your first pair. That Burns could be on your second pair. Some defensemen, Mario Ferraro, could be on your second pair. And if that had worked out like sort of what
they expected,
then Ferraro would look a lot better. And Burns would look a lot better, right?
Big problem is, he's put out of position, and he's going to try hard. He's going to give it everything he can with his every shift. But like, if you look at Evolving Hockey's, their RPM, models and stuff like that, where so last year in 56 games, he was, I was loading right now. He was 61st in defensive percentile. So, he's a above average defender. And then this year that dropped, kind of close to the same amount of ice time, to the 31 percentile in defense. And I just, that worries me, where he's not kind of taking that next step. And it's tough where he's being asked to do too much, and that's not fair to him. But I'd worry, especially with the amount of minutes he's already logged and stuff. And you look at Vlasic, and he fell off a cliff. And I don't think Ferraro's going to fall off a cliff or anything like that. But like, that's Mario Ferraro in the future, of him just falling off a cliff because he's played 1,000 minutes already, and he's in his 3 seasons or whatever. So, or a bajillion minutes already in his 3 seasons. So, again, I think if he's placed in if he's your second line or second pair defenseman, I think he's in a much better situation. But again, the Sharks just don't have that top pair shutdown defenseman and he's been asked to do too much. But anyway, onto his contract though.
Yeah.
When's he getting paid?
So I think that is, like, you brought it up, that I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Kane grievance, because that's obviously going to be a huge difference. It's sort of at this point, it's a win or lose kind of thing. There's no real in between unless they settle. Mm-hmm. And so the Sharks, if their termination of Kane's contract is upheld, that means that they are free and clear completely of Evander Kane's contract. Which is, I think, after this year, 3 years and $21 million left. And if they lose, then they are on the books for all of it, except for whatever new team signs them for. So Evander Kane, unlike you, is not double dipping. but yeah, so it's going to be a lot though. Whatever, no matter what a team signs him for, because Kane is no matter what he's doing in Edmonton now. What's the score for that game, by the way? That game's going on.
I think they won.
Yeah. So. Okay.
Yes. So as we're recording this, yes, they won.
Okay. So yeah. So no matter what he does for Edmonton this year, I don't think that he's going to make back that money in free agency this offseason. Just too much water under the bridge. Not enough trust for a guy that the team's going to give him 321. So the Sharks are going to owe him something.
Have you seen the Oilers?
So yeah, so anyway, though, going back to Ferraro, though, I think that's going to be a big question. So what I've heard at this point is that there hasn't been too much movement on it, but nothing to worry about. That's normal for RFA, for one thing. And second, too, I think that there is some question or some pause, maybe because of that, because the Sharks need to figure out how much money they can throw at Mario Ferraro. They like Mario Ferraro.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if they do give a contract that you or other people may not be happy with, unlike say the Barabanov one, right? Where I think everyone universally is pretty much, well,
that's a great
that's
contract.
a good deal. Even if you don't like the player that much, like, it's not a contract that is really likely to hurt you too much. But Ferraro may still come in something like that, because I know that he is beloved. But again, we'll have to see with the King grievance. So right now, again, no movement from what I understand there.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. If you don't know your budget, it's hard to budget money for it.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, and the Sharks, it's not like they don't really have. I mean, other RFAs they gotta figure out. They have John Leonard, Gadovich, Shimoleski, Noah Gregor, Dahlin, like Malash, and then Kapokaka. None of these guys are like breaking the bank. Like, you can kind of figure out these other RFAs. I think, Ferraro's the big one where you gotta. I think he's your first of the pecking order there, and then everybody else can kind of fall in line there. Right? So
another conversation point, though, sorry to interrupt, though.
No.
We'll do this in the future, though, because this is going to be a long one. You mentioned the evolving hockey numbers. I'm fairly certain that I don't know if a lot of people use them in in terms of people who are deciding contracts and whatnot. Whether they should or not, that's, I guess, another question to debate. I'm going to check around on that, and I love their work. I subscribe, so I'm not trying to denigrate, but I think that some of the public, or this is not exactly public because their stuff is behind a paywall, and it is worth a subscription. I do love their stuff, but
yeah, I mean, it's not the gospel end all be all, and especially
it's
with
used a little too often as such, too, in my opinion. I'm gonna just throw out my opinion. So
yeah, and it's not a gospel end all be all with it, but I think it's a good reference point to. But it's a little bit tougher with defensive minutes and et cetera, et cetera. But
I don't think analytics have learned to capture the defensemen or the defensive defensemen yet. But that's another conversation.
So we talked about a little bit about the GM, I guess, with the coach. So any juicy news, Mr. Insider Sheng, on the next Sharks GM, and why is it Kevin Weeks? Is he just going to pop up now? I'm waiting for him to pop up now. This is Kevin Weeks. I'm announcing I am the new Sharks general manager here on the
That'd be awesome. He came right in the third window right there, right?
Yeah.
with the pyramids in the background or something, right?
I did try to do my best Kevin Weeks this week when I was at Disney.
I saw that Legoland.
I tried to do my best. So
that should have been where you announced your guest tenure at our guest residency at San Jose Hockey Now podcast. So.
Yes, next time.
Yep. But so GM search. So I've heard a lot of different names. I can't say, I had to be very careful with what I say. One name I believe I can say that I've heard, but I am not sure that this person has interviewed. But I've heard it, though, and from someone in the know, is Gillis. But again, I don't know for certain if he's been interviewed, and I think that the Sharks, I get the impression that they've done a pretty good job of keeping it somewhat under wraps, insofar as we don't actually know anybody who's actually been interviewed, right? But Jonathan Becker told us a couple of days ago And I have a story on that in San Jose Hockey Now, just sort of what's going on with the GM search, that he said that there is no front runner, and we have had preliminary conversations with 10 to 12 people. At this point, at least, and I could be wrong, by the time this podcast, hits tomorrow, there are no names of actually who they've actually interviewed, right? At this point, that anyone has had, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know people that people believe are candidates, right? Like Kevin Weeks, which I reported, and I stand by that. John Ferguson Jr., which Jeff Merrick reported. Some of the usual suspect names, right? Like Gillis is one of them that I've heard, but again, I don't know this for a fact. So again, so I, it's something that we will learn more about. Jonathan Becker did say some interesting things though, when we talked with him a couple of days ago about it, saying that he thought that there'd be 4 to 5 very serious candidates by the end of this month. But he also mentioned that the playoffs are a factor too. So some teams have requested that their possible candidates not be interviewed until after the playoffs.
Makes
So
sense.
one example of that possibly is Chris McFarland with the Colorado Avalanche. Don't know that, again. I don't know that he has been interviewed. The Sharks want to interview him. That they have asked the Avalanche for permission. Don't know that for a fact, but he is one of those usual suspects, one of those guys on the cusp, right? That a lot of people are talking about for potential GM jobs. Obviously, Tampa Bay too, right? Could be a possibility there too. But yeah, so even we get to the end of this month and there's 4 to 5 candidates, it doesn't mean that we're very, very close to a hire, because still
They're
might be
taking
waiting for a
Yeah.
couple other guys, right? Yeah. So so it just sounds like it's going to be a long haul search.
Yeah, I mean, and again, they haven't had to do this for a while, so I think taking your time. You have a core infrastructure in right now, so it's not like you're scrambling to try to find, everyone got cleaned out and stuff like that. So I think, yeah, take your time. It's the most important offseason the Sharks have had in a very, very long time. So yeah,
they have a lot of confidence in the Doug Wilson Jr., Tim Burke, Joe Will to lead into the draft, right? So
yeah,
it's clear that they do have a lot of confidence in those guys.
Yep. Other big news this week: Patrick Marleau officially hung them up. Patrick Marleau was my first favorite Sharks player. I told the story a bunch of times on Locked on Sharks. My best friend and I, we went to a Sharks game. Back in the day when you would order a jersey, you would go like to the Sharks pro shop, you would order your jersey, and then they would bring it to you in the second period and like hand you your jersey. And so I have a the Black Armor Marleau jersey, and my best friend's got the Black Armor Thornton jersey. And that was, Patrick Marleau was my first Sharks love. I was I didn't get into the Sharks until like 2005, but, watching him be in such an important part of the Sharks was, it sucks watching him at the end of the year as Sheng leaves me right now. At the end of his career, kind of being trotted out there as a second line center, and definitely didn't have his fastball anymore. But like having just him being Mr. Shark, and that's the thing. Like, he is Mr. Shark. He's going to get his jersey retired finally this year, and this upcoming season. And for me, that was I know he was. You can argue his Hall of Fame case, and Kyle and I did this on the Locked on Sharks podcast this week. But like, it'll be interesting to see his Hall of Fame case if he's a compiler, definitely a compiler. Wasn't there's maybe 1 or 2 seasons where he was the best player on the Sharks, but like. There's plenty of Hall of Fame guys who were compilers and weren't always the best players on their team. And I think he will eventually get into the Hall of Fame, maybe in a weak class type of thing. But like, he's I think he's one of the most important Sharks for the franchise, helped to legitimize the franchise, especially with him and Owen Nolan, and then Joe Thornton helped to make them a Stanley Cup contender in his time. So it's nice to see him retiring as a Shark, and we got him during when he broke the all-time game record, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, it'll be great to actually see a retired jersey hanging up in the rafters in the SAP Center. So finally overdue. Now, if we can get Joe Thornton and Owen Nolan numbers up there as well, because Owen Nolan number 11 should not be worn either. But what's your favorite Patrick Marleau story, Sheng?
Well, I'm sorry. I just
your computer bit the dust.
My so I actually am on a different angle now. We're using my laptop speaker. So let me turn on. This is yeah, there you go. Looking straight on again. So the 10 pounds I gained looking up are gone. I think.
So what's your favorite? You covered Patrick Marleau. You got to talk to him, multiple times and stuff. And what is your favorite Patrick Marleau story? Because I just talked about how much I love Patrick Marleau and how important he was to the Sharks. But what was your favorite Patrick Marleau story?
Well, none, because I grew up a Kings fan. I'm just joking. No. I actually thought it remarkable when Patrick broke the record last year, the Gordie Howe's all-time games played record. He broke the record in Vegas, and he spent end of the game. All the Vegas Golden Knights go out to congratulate him, and he spent an extra couple of moments with Marc-Andre Fleury, and I wrote about this. And Fleury said that, asked kind of what they talked about, right? And Fleury basically said, well, he just congratulated me on my career. And that sounds like Patrick Marleau to you, right?
Yeah.
He just broke one of the most hallowed records in hockey, one of the most sort of unbreakable records, right? Gordie Howe's Gordie Howe played into his 50s to accumulate that record. Granted, Gordie Howe played in the NHL where they're shorter seasons and whatnot, but who knows? If Gordie Howe played more, he might have got hurt more. Who knows, right? But anyway,
then Marleau lost 2+ seasons to lockout, a COVID season.
Excellent point there too. Right.
It's
So whatever you think about the record, like, it's not that remarkable in some ways. It's not a goals record. It's, he just stepped on the ice and he just broke the record. Wow. Whoop-de-doo, it is really a remarkable record in terms of durability, just not something that hockey players normally do, right? Because it's just physical, fast game. People get hurt. Anyway, so for Marleau to take that moment on really his night, and to congratulate Marc-Andre Fleury on his career, that's Patrick Marleau for you, right?
Yeah. It'll be nice to see him finally get the Sharks number up there. I'm excited for him to get his jersey retired, and hope, like I said,
I agree. It's no question. I know that there's some debate about that. No question about that. No question about the Hall of Fame, in my opinion, but that's a whole nother discussion.
And then let's get Owen Nolan numbers out there too while we're at it. So,
ooh, that's a little being a little aggressive. We might have to argue that point a little
bit. Kyle, I might have to tag team Kyle in for that one. All right, couple last little things. So you have Andrei Kuzmenko, a 26-year-old winger for Scott St. Petersburg, looking for a job in the NHL. Potential Sharks have 53 points in 45 games.
Sharks, he can score. Sharks need scoring.
What? I was told, yes. You can't win every game 2-1. Sorry. Anyway.
Well, you can, but you have to have better goaltending and a better defense. So.
Please put some respect on James Reimers.
You gotta have better something somewhere.
Yeah, James Reimer died for us since this season.
He did.
So
what are
potential?
Okay, so this is interesting to me. I've heard both sides of it, sort of. I've heard that there could be some interest, and then I got some pushback on it, and strong enough pushback where I'm not going to write about it because I don't know how real it is. I do know that Kuzmenko is coming. I know that there's interest from multiple NHL clubs. I think the Canucks I've read are in it, and why not? Right? If you look at his numbers, right? I don't know
Yeah.
much about the player's game, but 53 points, 45 games, top KHL team, 26, sort of in his prime. Couple interesting notes about him too. He was actually Barabanov's teammate in SKA a couple years ago. So I'm not going to say either way. I would tend to think that it's not going to happen. That the Sharks are not in it, but I did hear again that of the possibility, and it is an area of need for the Sharks. So not something to ignore, but I would say not likely. But what I did hear, though, that I found interesting about it, though, you talk about the GM search and there's no hurry.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that this means that there should be a hurry about it, but one thing I was told that I do totally buy that for someone like a Kuzmenko or somebody like him coming over who is coveted, can kind of have a little bit more choice of where to go and that sort of thing, right? That a factor is to know who your GM and coach is or
Yeah.
are. And the reason being, it'll be pretty obvious. So once I say it, is because you don't want to go somewhere where the GM is going to bury you or the coach is going to bury you. If
Yep.
you're a guy like a Kuzmenko who is not going to have that many kicks at the can in the NHL, and you want to make a good first impression, especially if you're him, and so you want to go somewhere where you kind of know or like there's a track record there.
Mhm.
And actually, in San Jose's case, with Bob Bugner, and I'm not saying there's a reason to keep Bugner, but with Bob Bugner and Barabanov, Bob Bugner definitely gave Barabanov a lot of run to establish himself in the NHL. Hopefully, Alex buys Bob a six pack
Yes.
as a thanks, along with Thomas Turtle and Vander Kane and Timo Meyer, I guess. Wow,
Yes.
wow, he's at it. So, but anyway, though, so track record there it was helpful, and obviously the GM too. You want a GM that wants you, right? And so I'm just saying hypothetically because again, I don't think the Sharks will be in on Kuzmenko, but if it's a Joe Will that signs you, but then let's say Kevin Weeks takes over, right?
Yeah.
And Kevin Weeks doesn't like your game, then what the hell?
Yeah. It's
It's
like
gonna
I
be a
just
year
signed you.
wasted. Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
right. Or the same thing with a coach, right? Where like, well, you're hoping it's a Bugner because you talk with the Barabanov, and maybe Barabanov has good things to say about Bob. And anyway,
Hmm.
the track record there is that Barabanov got a fair shot under Bob, right? And so you're hoping, but then it's you think that you're gonna meet Bob Bugner at training camp, and oh no, it's Mike Babcock.
Ugh, please don't say that.
Just for example, right? So yeah, so that is kind of an interesting factor in that. I'm not saying that's why the Sharks wouldn't be in contention for Kuzmenko or any other kind of free agent.
Mhm.
There's also the cases too where the player or the agent might wait.
Yep.
They might wait for not just the Sharks, but for GM situations and coaching situations to clear up around the league. So then they can be make a more informed decision. Because if you kind of jump at the first offer now in the middle of May, but in a couple of months there's a somewhere else, some other situation, right? There might be a
Yep.
coach that you would have rather have played for, or reverse, somebody that you totally want to stay away from if you're a Kuzmenko or any kind of European free agent. And so I thought that was very interesting, actually, kind of a detail just to keep in mind for these kind of things. They're just not even, again, relevant to the Sharks and the hurry or non-hurry with hiring a coach or hiring a GM and potentially hiring a new coach, but just in general, just how important it is for these free agents, who they're kind of will be kind of dictating their future from at those management positions.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like you said, I mean, he's got one, maybe two shots in the NHL.
Hmm.
So if you screw up your first shot because you go to the wrong team, yeah, makes sense. So,
but sometimes you get lucky though, and you get traded to
a terrible
San Jose
Sharks team
for
that 9-game sample size. Let's go, Barabanov.
Well, no, but you get traded to San Jose for Antti Suomela. So
yes, there you go. You get 9-game sample size.
Yeah.
All right, last thing on the docket, of course, the Sharks picking 11th in the NHL draft because the draft lottery is super boring now. And no teams get to move up unless you're the Devils.
I don't like this. I watched it this year. Just right. I don't know. What do you think?
It could have been done in an email.
Yeah.
Barry, it could have been done
right.
in an email.
Yeah. I mean, in the COVID era, all this stuff is done this way. Yeah, just do it that way, right?
At least like the NBA one, there's like a bunch of crazy movements, and like it's impossible to track like who can do what because you can go in top 4. And it's just like you can go. It's boring, and I get it. Like you're trying to keep. I don't know. Just more chaos is fun. So
yeah, chaos is fun. I agree.
Chaos is more fun. So anyway, we want to save the luck for next season with next year's the 2023 draft class, which is going to be stupid, insane at the top of the draft class. So, which is the perfect segue into our interview with Chris Peters, where we talk about the 2022 draft. We talk about some of the Sharks prospects and why he personally hates Brad Lambert. Hockey fans, feel the action on the ice like never before with DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NHL. Right now, new customers can bet just $1 on any team to win and get $150 in free bets if they do. If Sportsbook isn't available in your state yet, you can still hit the ice for cold hard cash. New customers can make their first deposit and play free for thousands with DraftKings daily fantasy hockey contest. Draft a lineup of 8 skaters and a goalie and rack up points for goals, assists, saves, and more. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. Best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use the promo code THPN. Just bet $1 on any NHL team to win and get $150 in free bets if they do. That's code THPN at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NHL. Age 21, restrictions apply. All right, we bring in Chris Peters, world traveler from... you guys know him from the Daily Faceoff, also has the Talking Hockey Sense podcast and his own Hockey Sense
newsletter
as well. Newsletter, thank you.
Yep,
so subscribe, please do.
Yes.
Chris, now that you can actually travel the world again, go smell the urinals in person as you're at the rinks again. What's it like actually being able? You just came back from Germany. What's it like actually going to see small children play hockey again?
Oh boy, that doesn't sound creepy at all. Yeah, so no, it's great. I mean, I've been lucky enough. Last year I was at the World Under 18s in Texas, and this year it happened to be in Germany, and that was awesome. To be able to be there. It's one of my favorite tournaments to cover. I think this was my 8th under 18s. I covered, I was there twice with USA Hockey as an employee there, and then later I went with them as like their broadcaster. And then the last 3 I've covered kind of independently. And yeah, I mean it's always great to be at that, but to be able to be at another part of the world and to see kind of some of the hockey culture in Germany. It's certainly similar to the United States, where it's not the biggest sport, but the people that are passionate about it are super passionate about it, and they had great crowds and really good showings. And the tournament was in 2 historic hockey cities for Germany, Landshut and Kaufbeuren. So it was really cool to be there for that, and then also just to see a lot of the great players. I think there's a lot that we don't know about this class still, but to be able to see them at this stage of the season was very helpful for my purposes for sure.
Well, let's skip the urinal talk. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah. So bring it the 2022 draft class. We know Shane Wright is presumably the number 1, but then it kind of seems like throw everybody else in the hat between picks 2 through 12 and kind of shake it out. So how would you describe this 2022 draft class if people are just starting to kind of check in onto the draft class right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fairly average. It's weak at the top and probably similar to most drafts in the middle or like that next tier. I think that there's similar to last season, there's just not a huge consensus in terms of, who the next best guys are. Now, I'll even say we can say that Shane Wright is very, he's on most number one boards.
Yeah. Presumed number one.
Yeah, not unanimous. Which I find fascinating. And I've been having a lot of conversation. I just want to just use that as a jumping off point. I've been having a lot of conversations lately with people about Shane Wright, and they're like, if he had this performance, which is actually the lowest points per game in the OHL since Rick Nash, in terms of what number one picks, and that was a harder era to score in the OHL. If not for the exceptional status, how do we view him? The other thing is that not a lot of guys have jumped up and said, hey, I'm the number one guy this year.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes Shane Wright. He played really well down the stretch the second half. He really improved. But there's still a lot of questions about overall upside. And so with that, when you don't have a very strong number one, it kind of impacts your opinion of the entire draft. Often we look at the draft and we view it solely at what the top players mean. I think if you're in the latter stages of the first, the top 10, you still got a chance to get a really good pick. I think it, precipitously drops, probably not until 20, so 2025, so like that's where, you start saying, oh man, for me, I think that's really where you start seeing drop offs. But going into the World Under 18s app allowed me to see some of the Europeans that I'd only seen on video, and came away, more impressed getting a chance to see them against their peers. And, there were a lot of guys that helped their cases. There were certainly some that didn't, but, we got to see kind of that next tier of prospect as well. And I think if you're picking late in the first round, you feel like you got some real good opportunities to get a really good player there.
Actually, I was going to ask Chris if you ran into any of these players at any beer gardens. Can you share that insider info there?
No, I didn't. Not that I'm aware of. I did. Somebody told me that after Canada got bounced, there were a couple of guys with their parents.
I knew it.
Yeah. So
stock rising in my
D&D.
Yeah. So I was, and I was.
No, that's stock rise. Stock rise.
Yeah, I can confirm that there were a lot of NHL scouts at those local beer gardens and brew houses, though. I definitely saw them there.
They were looking. You gotta turn every stone. So
yeah, exactly. You gotta know.
Want to see what the leaders are.
Yeah, absolutely.
So who coming out of the World Under 18s? Who kind of, in your eyes, who do you think their stock kind of rose the most, and who do you think kind of hurt their stock coming out of that?
Yeah, I would say that, the guys that really pushed their stock up were the Swedish players, Jonathan Lekiramäki, Noah Ostlund, Liam Ogren. They all played really, really well. I think Ogren and Ostlund had more to prove. And they really showed up in a big way in this tournament, and helped Sweden win gold. I think you could say the same for Matthias Havelid, their top defenseman. He's a 5'10" defenseman. I think a lot of people had him slotted in second round, maybe even third round. Now with the performance like he had, one of the best all-time performances in that tournament for a defenseman in terms of points, and points per game. That's a guy where you say, hey, maybe we need to go back and do some extra work and make sure that we didn't discount him for his size too early, because he made a lot of mature reads, a lot of great plays, really mobile, great footwork, just heady defenseman. And I thought he defended well. And, you take him off that roster and I think they have a real hard time getting pucks up ice. He was the best defenseman by far there. Another guy who really, he's the MVP of the tournament and he popped incredibly with some of his power play goals was Yuri Kulich, who has, good size. He can play down the middle. He can play wing for you. He can do a lot of different things and does them well. And I think for me to see a guy that scored 9 goals in the tournament, and basically put that Czech team on his back at times, that says a lot. And I know there were scouts that had him trending up already, and they were hoping, hey, maybe he'll slip to the second round. I don't think that's going to happen anymore, just because teams, big performances at the under 18s can matter a lot. It's usually one of the last viewings that you have, but it's also an opportunity to see these guys against their peer group. And Kulich looked like he was ahead of a lot of his peers in that regard. But those guys definitely helped. In terms of guys that hurt their stock. There were also some guys in the Swedish team that didn't take that next step. Philip Bystedt is a guy that he's got great size. He's a good skater. He has all the physical tools. I just didn't see him make as sizable enough contribution to that Swedish team and their second tier players. I think, to a certain extent, like Joakim Kemell was really good. He got sick. He scored some huge goals, but there were a couple instances where he didn't play all that particularly well. And he missed the game due to illness. So I wouldn't really, I think the player's sensational. I wouldn't say that he dropped too far or anything like that. One of the guys that was really rising before they got to Germany was David Goyette, who played for Canada and kept finding his ice time go down. He started basically as a top line player, and by the end of it, he was kind of towards the fourth line. And this is a guy that had 33 goals, 73 points in the OHL this year, and he had 3 points in the tournament and just was a non-factor, and just he didn't have it at this tournament. And it gave me some concerns because some of the things that I was worried about with him in terms of his general skating and, some of the like his skating is good, but it's like, is it so good that it can overcome some of these other things? Like, does he have that shift to shift competitiveness? Does he have that ability to be more than a skill guy? And I worry that, a performance like that can resonate. So he was really trending up, but unfortunately for him, not a strong performance there in Germany. But the same can be said for a lot of that Canadian team outside of Connor Bedard. So, but those are some of the guys that just definitely jumped out to me as guys that I didn't come away blown away by.
How much can, like, with these big tournaments where it feels like you don't want to take too much stock out of it because it's such a small sample size compared to like watching, like their regular season and stuff like that. But at the same time, you're usually playing against better competition. So how do scouts try to balance like what happens at a big tournament versus comparing, going back to just watching the tape of a guy, kind of their day to day?
Yeah, they can say it doesn't matter, but it usually does. And the biggest reason why is because most assistant general managers and general managers are going to be at that tournament. So they're going to see it. And those are the ones where that ultimately make the decision. I mean, there have definitely been times where scouts and guys, might be the only time they see them. And all of a sudden the GM comes away in love with that player. And the smart ones are the ones that allow their scouts to say, hey, like, that's not what we saw this year. And the ones that think they are smarter than their scouts are going to say, well, we're taking them anyway. So that's kind of, and that does happen and has happened many times over.
And that's not hockey. That's every sport ever.
Exactly. Yes. So like
Jerry Jones.
100%. So that's kind of amazing to me as well. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see with how this shakes out. But I do think that, you take the full body of work, but you also understand this should be a time when these are pressure situations, seeing how these players react, seeing the fact that you can compare and contrast players right there on the same ice surface. You've been watching them on video all year. You've been watching Logan Cooley against the USHL, and then you're watching Jonathan Lekkerimäki against the the SHL in Sweden. And then you're like, oh, well, now I can see them both on the same ice sheet. So that helps as well. And I think that's really instructive to the viewer and to the scout that, hey, this is something we have to take it into consideration and still contextualize every piece of his season, including that one tournament.
So let's get into kind of where the Sharks are. The Sharks are going to be 11th in the draft. In your latest mock draft on the Daily Faceoff, you have them picking defenseman Pavel. I'm going to screw up his name. Minchukov.
Sounds pretty. Yeah, that sounds good enough. But yeah, I've been saying Mintukov, so I could be wrong. Yours sounds more Russian.
I've been working on my Russian all off season thanks to Barabanov. But so give us the kind of the lowdown on this defenseman. The Sharks after Merkley, there's really not like a top high-end blue chip defenseman in the Shark system. So
I don't know if Merkley is that either. I just want to.
And at this point, we don't even know if Merkley
he's not. Yeah,
is
Yeah.
that, you
Yeah.
know, so give us
I
a
could have told
lowdown
you that on draft day. Sorry. Go
Yeah.
ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm still there's still hope. I'm still holding out. But anyway, give us a lowdown on Pavel.
Yeah. So the reason I put him there was mainly because, I think that a lot of the best forwards were taken. Then you also, I certainly considered putting Lekkerimäki there because I think he'll probably end up going higher than I had him in the mock, which is at 14. But just for the reason you stated, I think there's a need there. I also think that he's in that range, very reasonable in terms of, best player available. You've got, Erik Karlsson on the downside of his career. You've got a lot of rumors, obviously, about the Brent Burns situation. Could either of them be traded? And then all of a sudden, you're starting to say, well, what does our blue line look like long term? If you're looking at the system right now, not great. And so,
please put some respect on Terry Hitchcock's name.
So it was before this podcast. I saw that Sheng had retweeted my mock draft, and thanks for doing that. But I saw a Sharks fan angrily say they don't want more offensive defensemen. Here's the thing:
offensive defensemen are awesome.
At some point in the not so distant future, there is not going to be such a thing as a shutdown defenseman. It is not going to exist. If you can't skate and you can't move the puck, you can't play in the NHL.
Nope.
And Mintyukov can do all of those things, and he can score, and he can get the thing that I love that he does the most is something that I saw very early last season with Luke Hughes, and that is an ability to, walk the blue line especially well and get pucks closer to that. So walk it down a little bit closer than that, taking shots from the high slot, taking shots from the top of the faceoff circles as opposed from distance. And he has the skill to get inside and still not get beat. Now, defensively, there's work to be done. No question about it. But I don't think that he's a guy that I say can't defend. I think there's obviously he played on a pretty tough team this year, like with Saginaw, did not have a very good season. But he had a very good season. And so, that's a guy that I think, will still need to play some more junior hockey. You need to let him get a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. He did come over from Russia. The other thing I want to get into is the Russian factor.
Yeah.
And the Russians that came over to North America before everything happened with Ukraine, by and large, will still find that their draft stock is untouched by that. The guys that are still in Russia will definitely have issues with that. Because there's a lot of questions about what you can do about visas and all these other things. But Mintyukov came last year before the pandemic shut down the OHL season, and then he didn't play. So the previous season is nothing for him. And now he's, it didn't matter. He still was a top tier guy. And, I talked to enough people around, scouting that feel, this guy has a chance to be special. Like he right now, he looks really good, but he has a chance to be, a top 4 guy that, you can play on the power play, that you can use in a lot of different situations. And so, I think the fact that this is a guy that's been in North America, he's committed to staying in North America. You've got yourself a real good player there, and 17 goals, 45 assists this year. Not bad.
Looking over your mock draft, obviously guys like Wright, Cooley, they're not going to be available to the Sharks. And so I'm just wondering on your list, where's sort of that cutoff of what number, what pick number in your mock draft could potentially fall to a number 11?
Yeah, I'd say it starts right even at 5. Like Cutter Gauthier has been one of the biggest risers of the draft class this season, but there's no guarantee that he goes in the top 5. I did put him there because he's a wing. He does have some center capabilities. He's a power guy. He's big. He's fast. He's got some skating. He's got a lot of tools, the kind of tools that you're looking for in a modern day winger. And he's a legit goal scorer. But I would say that that's a guy that you could potentially see slip. There are other guys that I have lower in the draft that probably won't slip as far as I had him, like Joachim Kimmel at number 7, as who I had there. Danila Yurov, another Russian, where you say he is one of the Russians that's overseas and still has a year left on his contract. But that could be the value play, because if he does fall to 11 and all of a sudden you're saying, okay, well, we have a chance to have a guy that was, probably a top 10 pick if this didn't happen, then that's a guy that's worth grabbing. But there's just no consensus. You don't know how it's going to go there. You don't know when the run on defenseman is going to start. I mean, we think that Simon Nemec and David Jiricek are going to go in the top 6 or 7. But what if they don't? And all of a sudden you have one of those two guys there. It's all on the table. Frank Nazar, another guy, undersized center with great skill. It's like, all right, well, we have Thomas Bordelot already. Do we want that? I think Nazar has a little bit more pop, in his offensive game right now, and certainly in his skating. And so, there's that. And then even the other defenseman, if it's not Pavel Mintyukov, is it Kevin Korchinski, who had a huge season in the WHL? So you look at that list and you say any of those guys from 5 on down, and even the guys after, you look at the few that I had after them. Matthew Savoy, I had, slipping because I think, I've just heard enough buzz that his he's kind of slipped a bit. But there's got other guys like Lekaramaki, Isaac Howard, who had a big World Under 18s. There's a lot there. But, I think in the end, I just try not to overthink it and say, I think this is a guy that fits the style that they want to play long term in Mintyukov. And he probably is, he plays the game the way you want an NHL defenseman to play right now.
Well, I'm really excited about Gauthier. I hope the Sharks have a shot at him. Actually, here's a random Gauthier stat. His dad is Sheng Gauthier. Used to be actually played in NHL and played in NHL for the Sharks. And if you look, he played 3 minutes in a game in 1999. He stopped 2 of 2 shots. And so actually, if you look at Hockey Reference, he has the best save percentage of any Sharks goalie ever. I'm not joking.
Love it.
Yeah, I mean, that's if you're going to play in the league, just, if you're going to have a cup of coffee, just stop every shot. And you should
exactly.
I wanted to ask more about the kind of the US NDTP guys between Nazar and Sheng's guy, Cutter Gauthier here. So, I've kind of seen them, and you look at a lot of mock drafts, they kind of flip flop between the two. Can you give me the pros and cons of each guy and which guy you have Nazar after, but which guy do you prefer of the two?
Nazar.
Yeah.
I do. And the reason being is I think that his hockey sense is at a level that's, extremely high, a little bit higher than Gauthier's. I think Gauthier's has the physical tools advantage. But I think Nazar can play the style that gets you goals in the NHL. He's probably averages a breakaway a game because he's just so sneaky, gets behind defenses, anticipates plays incredibly well, has the good physical tools. The shot is outstanding. His ability to get inside in between the faceoff dots, that's huge. The shiftiness, the vision, he's a great shot pass threat. I view Gauthier more as a shoot first kind of guy. He'll pepper the net with shots, and he has a great shot, so we should use it a lot. I do think there are quite a few NHL teams that would tell you that Gauthier's higher on their list than Nazar is, and so I think that's probably the other thing that, the con for Frank is that he's smaller, and that's really it, and if that's the only thing, that's usually not a good enough complaint to completely shy away from a guy. Because he is tenacious. He does get in on pucks. He's not afraid. So he does all those things well. It's just a matter of, well, you've got Gauthier, who's so much bigger and stronger and still has all these offensive tools. He tracks pucks real well. He back checks well. He's committed in all zones. He's physical. That gives you a little bit more versatility in a player. And so, I think both of them are exceptional. But I still think Nazar's package of, his hockey sense and his skill lead me to believe that he's got a chance to be, a real good player and not really have the size be a factor.
Yeah, I mean, you see, especially the way the Sharks are drafting recently with, Bordelot and Eklund, where they're it feels like they're really focusing on this hockey sense and intelligence. And I think if he's there for the Sharks at 11, they're going to have a really tough decision based on their draft history and, whoever else could be on the board, but it feels like
Yeah.
he might be a natural fit for what the Sharks have been drafting recently. Correct?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, like, yeah, I think stylistically, absolutely a fit. You know, they've had success with guys from the program as well, and you know, we'll continue to go to that well when it works, and as it did with, you know, Bordelot, and you know, I think could be an everyday player real soon. So, yeah, so I would say that. I mean, sorry, I don't have like a super eloquent. I was just like, no, that sounds right. So, yeah, sure,
you're correct.
Yeah, I concur.
Just do this. Yeah,
Yes.
We're on video, Chris.
Yeah.
You just had to do this.
Yeah.
Everyone will
there we
understand.
Have you accounted for these Sens just making a dumb pick like they always do to really mess things up? So
it's very possible. I mean, like, and I wouldn't say, like, the thing is that.
Oh, you can. It's fine. You can.
No, I'll give credit to Ottawa for basically, especially in the last draft. They're like, well, we have a type that we want to draft, and that was big or physical.
Yeah.
And it was you know, time will tell. It's still too early to say, oh, they busted out. It's not looking great right now.
You're in the bag for Ottawa. Big Ottawa's coming after Chris right here.
Well, I try to be nice to the Sens sickos. They have it bad enough.
Oh, they are.
Ottawa has money for somebody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's on the few people. But the Sens sickos guys can be very relentless. So one other guy I wanted to ask you, or a couple other guys. So Lekkerimäki, who's been kind of flying up the boards, and you talked about him, and you know, the Sharks really, other than Daniel Gushin, they don't really have a guy who's like certified sniper material. And Lekkerimäki seems like one of those certified sniper guys. Can you kind of explain kind of what makes him so kind of unique and snipery? Yes.
Yeah, he's very snipey. So Lekkerimäki is such an interesting player. I think there might be a few teams that have him ahead of Kamel in terms of elite goal scorers in this draft. Or Kamel, I don't think Kamel is like an actual Finnish pronunciation of it, but I can't, you know, when I learn about these guys, it's typically just by their name, and then I read it and it's like, it stays that way for forever. Like, yeah. So, but anyway, just to that aside, the thing about Lekkerimäki, I mean, first off, he has an elite shot. I mean, it just is a tremendous shot. It's powerful. It's quick. It's accurate. It's can get it off from anywhere. He's not afraid to shoot it ever. Can score from in tight. He gets inside very well. Really good from the outside. But, you know, I think that he has real good sense. He's got great net sense in terms of, you know, how to get pucks where they need to go. Some of the great goal scorers, like, you know, we'll talk about them when we talk about 2023, but like Matvei Michkov is a genius level goal scorer, not because of his shot is incredible. It's because he just knows where to put the puck at all times. You know, and I wouldn't say that's true of Lekkerimäki, but he did have 7 goals in the SHL this year, which really flew under the radar. I feel like in terms of, you know, that's a really impressive number for a young guy. You know, and then he went and he led the under 18 worlds in scoring. So it was like, okay, well, he's done it now. We get it. We get it. So, yeah, it's I think he's got an opportunity to be, you know, a top 15 pick, a top 10 pick at best. But he's got the skill. He's got some good quickness. And, you know, in fact, he missed a month with illness this year. He missed the last month of the season, comes into the under 18s, and it's like he never left. So, in fact, he looked better than he ever had for me personally. And this is a guy that also had a lot of goals at the Holinka Gretzky Cup as well.
Really quick on it. So with all these Djurgården guys, is there a little bit of a worry since Djurgården got relegated to the Hockey Allsvenskan? Do you think with scouts is like they're not going to be playing in the SHL next year? Is there like a slight pause when you kind of pick these guys because they're not going to be playing against top tier competition in the SHL next year?
No, I don't think so. Because I mean, I think, you know, if anything, the Allsvenskan being in the second division, it might mean he gets more ice time. It might
he just gets a score.
He gets a, you know, and it's not like it's you know, I know Jonathan Dahlin destroyed that league, but it's a lot tougher for teenagers to play in. And if you give them that opportunity to play with that confidence and with a team that's trying to regain promotion, yeah, that's I think it could work out really well for you in the end. You'd rather have that than have him, playing fourth line minutes or third line minutes in the SHL. In the Allsvenskan, there's a good chance he could be a top 6 guy every day.
Perfect. Last guy I got to ask you about. Why do you hate Brad Lambert?
Wasn't
hate
even
him.
in the mock draft.
Yeah. Sharks fans, we've already started on my other podcast. We've already started the Brad Lambert manifestation to the Sharks at 11, and I know his
he might be there in the second round. Wait, the Sharks don't have a second round pick.
So why it feels like Lambert has such it's almost like Atiratu last year, where it was like you saw him projected as a top 10, top 15 pick, and he didn't go till the mid to late second round, I believe. It's like 56 or 60 or something like that.
Yeah.
Is
third
Brad
round,
Lambert?
Actually.
Oh, third round. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry. Is Brad Lambert Atiratu 2.0?
Actually, I think you're right. Second round. For Ratu, I would say, 52nd overall. I had to go look that up because I was like, wait a second, that's not right. I don't think Brad Lambert's going to fall out of the first round because his skating is such a way and skill are so high end, but there are a lot of concerns about the player.
Mm-hmm.
You look at his season numbers this year.
Oh, they're terrible.
They're down. They're down. And he's on his third team in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody's saying, what's this guy's deal? The combine, I don't know if there's going to be a more important interview subject at the combine than Brad Lambert, assuming he's there, and he should be. I think every single team is going to want to talk to him, and every team is going to absolutely grill him. Ratu, the thing that makes Brad Lambert more frustrating than Aatu Ratu last season was that Brad Lambert has better tools. Like his tools are simply better. Ratu's bigger and stronger and tougher. And Brad Lambert, there are concerns that he's too soft, that he doesn't play hard enough, that his shift-to-shift competitiveness is lacking, that, there could be attitude issues. That's something that'll be sorted out, just in terms of things. He's frustrated coaches that he's played for there. And, he went to Lahti to get a better opportunity and get more ice time and did nothing with it this year. Now, he was too old for the under-18 world, so it didn't give him an opportunity to prove himself again. But this is a guy that we came into this season, or at least last year, felt, hey, he could be a top 10 pick, or he could be a top 3 pick, three pick. Like he's going to challenge Shane Wright, and he's not close. And I haven't done my final rankings yet. I can't tell you one way or the other yet because I'm still working through it. If he's going to be in my top 32, that's where I'm at. And the issue is, and you talk to scouts from Finland that watched him all year, and they'll tell you, they'll all say the skill, the skating, like his skating might be the best in the draft of anybody. But when it comes to hockey sense, getting inside, creating offense, all we have as a piece of evidence that that's something that he can do on a consistent basis is 2 games at the World Juniors against weak competition. And sad to say, that's, I just said consistency. Well, we saw it for 2 games, so the fact that, I think the player has a chance to be, something really special, which is why I still think I could put him in my first round. But if you don't go into that situation with eyes completely wide open, that he is a project and not a finished product, then you basically have to, recalibrate your expectations, because there is going to be things about him that are going to frustrate the heck out of coaches. And it makes me wonder if he ever, puts it together in enough of a way. Like, I think he's a real opportunity to never play in the league if he doesn't figure this stuff out. And to think that from a year ago, like I think it's unlikely, that he wouldn't play in the NHL. I think he'll find a way, but could he be an impact player at this? Not if he continues on the current trend he's on. So that's why I would have him lower.
Chris, you're breaking my heart.
The eye test, he is an eye test dream. I'll tell you that. Until you start really watching closely, and then it's
Lambie, you're breaking my heart.
Yes, this is a path I can't follow you down. All right, let's talk about some guys who already are in the Sharks system. So I'm going to start with the big one because there's a lot of people quietly freaking out about William Eklund's kind of bad season with Drew Gardens. How do you feel about him after this season? With he played okay with the Sharks and then had a down year with Drew Gardens. Do you still think he can be this elite player that he was drafted to be?
Yep.
Oh, good. Done. Chris, you're back on.
Yeah,
you're back in.
We
Buddy.
love you.
Yeah. So just to you know, I don't want to just say that. Like basically, I mean, it was a tough season for that whole team, and you know, you lose Holtz, and you're saying, "Oh, what are we gonna do?" You know, how to, you know, they didn't have really an adequate replacement there, and yeah, you would definitely want to see Eklund play better. You definitely would want to see him have new numbers. You know, like I think with him, it's just still a matter of you know, progression. And I think for some guys, getting sent back is a blow. You know, a blow to the ego, a blow to your confidence, and all those different things. I don't necessarily know if that was the case here.
It is. I can confirm that.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, like I'm sure that's I'm yeah. So I think for him, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to collect my thoughts because
That's
like
right.
he was one of my favorite players in last year's draft. I had him ranked really high. I have a lot of respect for him as a player and as a thinker of the game. You know, like I just think that his hockey sense is incredible. The thing about, like, I look at, so like Lucas Raymond barely, like I was saying all summer, I think he should go back to Sweden and actually be a top 6 player there. And guess what? He's a top line player in the NHL. Playing with elite players and being around elite players makes some people better. I think that very well could be the case for William Eklund. And I think that, you know, they'll keep him in North America this year, whether that's, you know, he should have a chance to make the team. He's going to have to earn it still. Yeah. But I'm not going to write him off based off of this season by any means.
Staple him to hurdles line and you'll be fine. That's
exactly. Wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't hurt.
So
any other Sharks prospects kind of change your projection of them this season? You know, 3 guys in particular who had very good seasons: Brandon Coe, Gannon Larocque, Krona too. Any of those guys this season kind of change your mind a little bit about them?
I mean, I've always liked Brandon Coe. You know, like I've thought that he could be a player. I don't know that I saw him scoring over 100 points in the OHL this year. You do have to. I mean, I will caution fans. You know, take that with a grain of salt. You know, those guys that are 19 and 20 years old, they should dominate the league. He's also physically bigger than everybody in the league.
Yeah, he's a man among
you know,
the boys.
He played in the AHL. He played in the AHL last season, so he's got pro experience. But I mean, what an absolute animal he was this year and still is. I mean, you know, 17 points in 7 playoff games as well.
Yeah. I think he had 4 assists the other night.
He's
like some stupid number.
He's absolutely incredible. And you know, you have that in a large package. He still needs to round out his game and improve other elements and even continue to get stronger and tack on more size than he already has. But that's a guy that certainly has the capability to be, you know, way better than anybody really anticipated for him as a fourth round pick. So really glad to see it. It's always, like, I've always thought that he had the skill level to be better than just, you know, just a big power forward and that. So I got lots of time for him and continue to have a lot of time for him.
I mean, see somebody that can maybe scratch a top 6 in the NHL if he reaches, kind of hits all the marks?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I would say, yeah, just because a guy has the big production, I don't think that that's necessarily going to be his future. I would say that he's probably more of a bottom 6 guy, where he's scoring depth, and a lot would have to go right. I think his skating would have to get, tick up a notch in order for him to be considered to be, a guy that you could pencil in that way. But certainly he's at least given reason to believe that he can be a bit more than what we all thought he basically was.
How about another kind of WHL guy who kind of had a down year? Was the Sharks' former first-round pick Ozzy Wiesblatt, who I know the Prince Albert Raiders were poo-poo platter bad this year. Should the Sharks fans be a little worried just because, again, the production just wasn't there with him this year? A little bit worried, or?
I mean, I would have certainly liked to see him take another step and, be a leader on that team and maybe carry them a little bit more. But as you mentioned, there's only so much you can do. And for him, it wasn't a very high scoring team in general.
Yeah.
And so the numbers kind of dictate that. And that's a team that, he's always played on really good Prince Albert teams. Wasn't the case this year. Now it's just a chance to, to get him into your system and work with him more closely. I think that's probably going to be the best thing for him. So, he was kind of, someone may have called him a reach at 31 at the time. And I personally had Bordelot ahead of him on my draft rankings that year. So, it's always funny how the expectations go for a first round pick versus a second round pick. And there were only a few spots between them, there wasn't that many.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think Wiesblatt has been on his main, like he's still on trend to be, a middle 6 energy skill forward. So I don't have much concern about that.
Yeah, I think like you're talking about with Eklund earlier, I think when he gets to the CUDA next year, they're going to have such an influx in talent. And I think playing with actual real guys instead of just a bunch of, I don't know who's on the Prince Albert. I can't name anybody else on the Prince Albert Raiders right now. But like, I think that might be the situation where he's like, oh, he's playing with Robbins, he's playing with Coe, and he's playing with, Ethan Cardwell, and all these guys are going to be coming to the CUDA, and this CUDA team is going to have a lot of talent added to it really quickly here. So
it's gonna be a good team to watch next year for sure.
Oh, they were awful. I was watching because we had Bordelot at the end of the season, and then Gushin and Larocque both played a couple, a handful of games with the CUDA.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, I actually get to watch some fun people instead of just all these random jabronis. Who cares?
Ended the season on a 15-game losing
streak. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so. I mean, and even if and the results may not be there, but if the prospects are there, then you're like, oh
yeah, that's I was like, oh, Gushin, look at that.
Everything. Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, definitely go check that team out.
Yeah.
Chris, last question for me. I wanted to just ask you about the goaltending. And just I don't know if you've seen these guys much. I know you've seen Strauss Mann because I read your Hockey Sense newsletter, of course, and you watch him during the Olympics.
Nice plug, Sheng.
Yep.
Thank you.
got it right in there.
Again.
Yeah, thumbs up there. Don't know if you watched Ben Gaudreau much either, but any thoughts on either of those guys and their kind of outlook?
Yeah, so Strauss Mann, very intriguing. The undersized goalie, if you're not 6'2", can you even play in the NHL? Is like the adage. I thought he was fine at the Olympics. He had a really strong year with Skellefteå, and that was very encouraging. And there were a lot of teams that kicked the tires on him after his collegiate season, but they all wanted more information. He provided that information this season with his performance in both the Olympics and in Sweden. And so he's got a long road ahead because of the size factor. He's got a lot to prove. I think he'll be an outstanding goalie in the AHL next year. And, he might even be a guy that you send if you feel like you have a log jam, that maybe you send him to the ECHL. But I think the way that things are set up, he'll be able to play significantly enough next year for San Jose, for the Barracuda.
Yeah.
So that's quality. That's you're absolutely happy about that. As for Ben Gaudreau, I didn't necessarily watch his games a lot this year because he's not necessarily a guy that I was super enamored with. Like I certainly ranked him last year, I thought, in a weak class, but not good numbers this year. Sarnia was okay. And I think
he got shelled a lot.
He did. Yeah, he did.
Like,
I mean, like that's
playoffs. I think he faced like 210 shots, and his counterpart faced like 120 or something like that.
Yeah, Windsor was a machine. Windsor was an absolute machine at that stage. So unfortunate there. But, I think that he's always been a guy that you're just going to have to wait and be patient about. He won the World Under 18s last year, but I didn't think that they won it because of him. He did play well in that final, but that was about, there wasn't necessarily a ton there. And boy, if you're looking for goalies this year, don't.
Good luck.
Yeah. So, no offense to all the goalies, but don't.
What's the highest round, or when will goalie go? You think the first?
I think we'll see one in the third. One or two in the third. Yeah. Outside shot at 6, but I think some of those teams that have $1 billion draft picks could take a goalie in the second. But
looking at you, Arizona.
Yeah, exactly. they have literally $1 billion. So I mean, I think, it's fine. And then Magnus Corona obviously winning the world the national championship with Denver. Didn't love his game this year. I thought that he was the weak link on their team because of the consistency issues that he had, but he was awesome in the tournament. He really was, and a reason that they won. So was glad to see that for him and great progression from him. And now he's a championship goalie. So that makes you real happy about where you're at.
Awesome. Chris, you've said it all. Where can the people find you and what do you got coming up next?
Yeah, so dailyfaceoff.com for NHL draft content for sure. A lot of extra stuff on Hockey Sense on Substack. So it's hockeysense.substack.com. I've got massive notes coming out on a lot of players from the under 18 worlds that you can get on Hockey Sense. So if you're like a super draft nerd and need to know everything on those types of players, that'll be a good piece for you to dive in on. Also 7-day free trial. So if you ever want to check it out, you can do that. Sorry, I can't offer $1 a month every, month like the Athletic. I mean, huge shot at the
Dropping
Athletic.
the mic on somebody there.
Yeah. I just saw it today. It's like, oh yeah, again.
You have another one? Are you kidding?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, but that's, and then obviously the Talking Hockey Sense podcast. I have a draft lottery.
Well, all of us are owned by the New York Times.
We all got a pod. Yeah, there are too many of us, and we'll keep putting them out there because people somehow keep finding them. So, but that's the main stuff. Lots of draft content to come in the lead up to the draft for sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris.
No, thank you guys. Always good to be with you. It's my pleasure.
Again,
all right.
Chris Peters hates Brad Lambert, but thank you to Chris Peters for jumping on.
But he loves William Eklund.
He does love William Eklund, so that's okay in our book. So thank you guys for listening to the inaugural first version of
Locked On Hockey Now, the
Lock On
San
Hockey
Jose
Now.
Hockey Locked On Now.
Yeah, to this insanity that is the new podcast thing. So so you can follow the show on Twitter at the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. You can
that's not the Twitter.
It's SGA Hockey Now podcast. What is it now? Let's see.
It is SJ Hockey Now pod.
That is a mouthful.
It is a mouthful because I just added, it's not that much of a mouthful. I just added pod to San Jose Hockey Now, which is at SJ Hockey Now. Yes. And you can find me at Sheng_Pang. Find my work at San Jose Hockey Now or my work at MEC Sharks.
You can find me on the Twitters at my fry hole. And if you want to listen to me 5 days a week, you can do that at Locked On Sharks. Bye, friends.